Hi guys. I wanted to talk to you about how I do an outline for paper. So let me share my screen with you. All right. So this is a pretty long guide, but it's actually not a super complicated process. So I just want to make sure that it's clear to everybody. It feels a little daunting the first time you try to do this, but hopefully you will get so used to it that it is second nature. You could just punch out a research paper in a couple of days. So let's start. Okay, so this is how I do it. You can do it any way you want. For this assignment, it doesn't really matter as long as you have a credible outline that I think you can write a paper from. So the first thing you do is start with articles around your proposal idea. You've already submitted your proposal and had it back to you. To be efficient with your time, make sure that your proposal idea is as narrow as possible. If I didn't think that your proposal idea was narrow enough, I did say so in your feedback. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to make it more narrow, but you know, in the amount of space that you have, so in a 1,000-word paper, if your proposal is not narrow enough, you're really going to struggle to do your topic justice. So it's really best to have as narrow an idea as possible. So I usually set aside about 10 promising articles for a 1,000-word paper. And you've already done 5 for your proposal. That might be all you need, but you might need more. So the first thing you do is create a blank document, and this will be kind of your notebook, your scratch paper. So what you're gonna do now is you're gonna do a careful skim of your articles. You don't want to read every last word and write a bunch of notes on them. It's just going to be too much. What you're gonna want to do is, scan for the most salient bits. Make sure that you understand the concepts of what's going on in the paper, what the experiment was about, if there was an experiment. Just make sure that you know enough about the paper to be able to intelligently skim it. And then start pulling out some tidbits. I call them tidbits because they're not going to be quotes. You don't want to use quotes in a student research paper. There's a lot of reasons for this, but suffice to say, in this context, you're never going to need to use quotes. Quotes are really for situations where the information cannot be restated into your own words, and that just is not going to happen in this context. So what you're pulling out and copying and pasting into your note document is not going to be something that you quote from. It's going to be something that you're going to cite appropriately and restate in your own words if you decide to use it. So in a good article, I usually end up pulling out about 3 to 5 tidbits. So you're really being very picky and very minimal here. You don't want to overwhelm yourself by pulling out too much stuff because you're not going to be able to organize it into something that makes sense. So don't do that. Try to stay as minimal as possible. And also never recite something. So it can be really tempting to be reading an article and you'll see something that the authors are referencing that somebody else did. So, they're going to be prefacing their own work and saying, this other researcher did this thing. And it will be very interesting to you and you will be tempted to cite that. But you need to go and find that original work. If you want to cite that, that's fine, but you have to go and find the original work that was done and cite that original article. You cannot cite a researcher talking about another researcher. That is never acceptable, and that's considered academic dishonesty because you can't cite something you haven't read. Okay, so the next thing is really important, is make sure that everything that you're copying and pasting into your note paper is labeled with the article that you got it from and the page number that you got it from. I cannot emphasize this enough, because you're going to think like, oh, it's okay, I'm not going to have to go back and you know, look at anything else on this page. I have enough for the citation. Believe me when I say write it all down. You may very well have to go back, and it is a drag to have to go back and find the original spot. Okay, so at this point, just all you're doing is copying and pasting. You are not trying to organize anything. You're just doing some reading and basically taking some notes electronically. Okay, so once you've finished your careful skim of the articles and all of that, what you're going to do is you're going to start realizing that there's going to be some themes that are popping out. So, you know, just for the sake of argument, let's say that your paper is about psychological risk factors for heart attacks. You've just read 10 papers about that, pulled out 4 tidbits from each. Now you have 40 tidbits. You know, you realize that 10 of them are about high stress professional environments, 10 of them are about poor coping mechanisms, 10 of them are about childhood trauma, and the other 10 are about other stuff. Okay, so what do you do now? What you do is you make headings and rearrange your tidbits underneath them. This is just like, all you're doing here is some rearrangement. So you're making headings for those categories that you saw coming out in the information that you've gathered. So you're making high stress professional environments, poor coping mechanisms, childhood trauma, and other. Pardon me. And if you're doing this correctly, you'll start to see the concepts come together to form arguments. So, you know, you're not going to use everything that you've pulled out. You know, inevitably there's going to be stuff that doesn't quite fit, or, you know, there's too much and you don't need something, or whatever. You're not going to use everything. But, you know, you have the luxury, because your paper is not very long, of being able to pick the things that are strongest to support your argument. Okay, so right. So this is the point where you also need to be pulling up your college level research paper writing guide, because what you need to do at this point is you need to write your thesis statement. So you have kind of, you know, an idea of what your argument is going to look like, but you don't have a thesis yet. You know, you started from a place where you just had an idea of psychological risk factors for heart disease, and now you have, you know, kind of some basis to form your arguments about what those might be. And now you need to write your thesis about what that might be. So go and look at your college level research paper writing guide about how to do a good thesis, but I don't want you to agonize about it at the moment. It's just a draft, you know. This is not the moment to make your thesis look as perfect as possible, because it very well might change while you're, you know, working on the rest of your outline. So don't stress too much. Just, you know, get it down, get an idea down. As you move forward, you're gonna change it. Okay. So now you're gonna open a new blank document. This is gonna be your outline document. And what you wanna do is you're gonna stick your thesis statement at the top of that document, so that you can kind of keep an eye on whether you're staying true to staying on topic. And you're going to take both documents, so your notes document and your outline document, and you're going to place them side by side so that you can see both at the same time. So now that you have, you know, your 10 tidbits for each paragraph or whatever, you're going to write an introduction sentence for each of them. Again, just like your thesis, you're not going to, you know, get too stressed out about exactly wording these perfectly, but you want to have your ideas down. So make sure that it's a complete sentence. Make sure that it follows all the rules laid out in the college level research paper writing guide about good writing that avoids bad habits. And then write your sentence and copy everything that you think might be useful for your paper from the note paper side of your screen to a bullet under the introduction section that you, or the introduction sentence that you just wrote. So like I said a little earlier, if something isn't working with the others, take it out. You have plenty of tidbits to pick from. If something isn't working, it's not fitting into your argument, you can't figure out where it's going to go, it doesn't quite work, just take it out. If you want, you can stick it back into the notes document. Maybe you'll come back to it later. Maybe a space will appear for it as you're writing. But at this moment, don't try to force anything. It's just an outline. So I want you to do exactly that for the other strong ideas that you have. So in this case, you have 3 strong ideas. All right, so now that you've done that, think about the length of your paper and how complex the arguments are that you're going to have to write. You've created a thesis statement, you've created introduction sentences for each of the paragraphs, and you have now copied and pasted into your outline pretty much all your supporting information that you're going to end up citing and writing around. So, in a college level research paper, pretty much every sentence you write is going to have a citation to it. So basically at this point how much space you're going to need to make your argument. So think about the 1,000 word paper requirement here. If you are looking at what you've done so far and you're like, there's no way I'm getting 1,000 words out of this, you have 2 options. You can go back and see if you need to strengthen some of the arguments that you're already making. So go back and find some more sources around the arguments that you're already making, or whether you have space to add more concepts. So, inevitably there's always going to be that other section that has things that you pulled out that are important but don't have a whole cluster of things around them, so they don't necessarily fit into these are the major buckets. But if you have something in there that is 2 or 3 tidbits that work together, then maybe actually you can find a place for that in your paper. You can either take the ones that you have and see if that's enough to make an argument out of it, or you can go and do just a little bit more research on that specific item, find more peer-reviewed research that you can cite, and just create more. You can do that as well. So this last step here, this optional step, if you really feel like smashing your outline, at this point you can go back and add closing sentences. So you already have your thesis, you already have the opening sentences to your body paragraphs, but at some point you're going to have to write closing sentences to your paragraphs too. I tend to do this kind of at the end of my process, like when I'm finishing up my rough draft is when I tend to do this, because I find it very difficult. But you might not, something might occur to you, or it might be a very easy transition from one idea into the next idea. And so, your closing sentences to your paragraphs might just sort of appear in your head, in which case, great, wonderful. Stick them in there, and, that's one less thing you have to do. So, if you do this process correctly, if you do your outline in this way, you have basically done all the writing for your paper except for, formulating the sentences, which it turns out is actually not the biggest part of the paper. So the biggest part of a research paper is doing the research, is putting together the research into coherent arguments. And once you've done that, actually making the arguments is not overall that difficult as long as you have a pretty good grasp of, good grammar and good spelling. And that's what the college level research paper writing guide is about. So make sure that you have had a chance to look through that before you attempt your outline. You should have done that before you attempted your proposal, but if you didn't, for sure, go back and do that again. You're also going to need to check in with that document a little bit to help you write your thesis. Oh, and another way of smashing your outline is to actually just write your introduction. You might have enough at this point to know what your introduction is going to look like. So, you can do that too. So anyway, if you have any questions on how to do this, feel free to ask me. Also, I just want to remind you a second time, like, you can write your outline any way you like. You do not have to do it this way. This is just a system that I've come up with over the many years that I was in college and graduate school that made it easier for me to get this done. So hopefully that's helpful, and let me know if you have any questions. Okay, thank you.